Hey, ladies and gentlemen, if I can bring the meeting to order. Do we have any apologies for absence?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. So if I can just bring the committee to the minutes of the previous meeting. Has anybody got any observations about the minutes? Thank you. So could I have a quick show of hands to support the minutes? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. That brings us to public question time. Nick, would you like to come to the mic there? Thank you. That's okay. You can press.
Thank you. So my question is based on the fact that the public consultation on the future of St Crispin Sports Centre was supposedly predicated on slightly reduced usage among a section of users at the centre compared to pre-COVID levels. Some users had reportedly migrated to the new Carnival Hub for some activities. At the public consultation meetings, the leisure officer leading the consultation was not clear on whether or how the school had been included in the consultation. The report presented to today's meeting has shifted the emphasis entirely away from the demand for sports facilities and community space and focuses entirely on the need to create extra school places and to do this as cheaply as possible. It disregards the consultation, which showed 80% public support for retaining existing provision. In one passing comment, that this is merely one part of the decision-making process. So my question is, does the committee accept that the public consultation was misleading at best and that the recommendation in the report will be widely interpreted as having been predetermined based on an entirely different agenda from that presented? And if the committee recommends the preferred option to the executive, will it include a requirement further to recommendation 6 to ensure meaningful public access is retained? Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. The committee will be considering the executive report on the future of St Crispin's Leisure Centre later in this meeting. Therefore, it would be premature for me to draw any conclusions before members have had that discussion. I would note that the option of transferring the asset to the trust was included in both the executive report that authorised the consultation and in the consultation itself. It is also worth reiterating that consultations are not referendums. They are one of the sources of information that supports decision-making and implementation. When we come to scrutinise the report, we will consider the points made in this question and review the extent to which views and concerns expressed in the consultation are being considered. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. My supplementary, I would say, first of all, I do acknowledge there's some great new facilities that are being built in the borough, and that's to great credit. But I would also say that this report neither sought nor considered the views of bodies most pertinent to the impact that would be caused by the closure of the sports centre, including the borough's own statutory Health and Wellbeing Board, the borough's wellbeing strategy, Get Barcher Active, the body established by the Sports Council to promote sport and physical activity in the borough, the borough's own leisure strategy, which sets as a priority maintaining and extending access to indoor leisure facilities, and the wider voluntary and community sector, members of which are crying out for access to more built facilities to support some of the most vulnerable members of our society. How can this committee fulfil its very important duty of scrutiny if it neither seeks nor considers comment from and the wider implications of these critical factors? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm not at leisure actually to answer all of those because there's quite a few topics in there that aren't in front of us, but I will reiterate that we are here to look at what evidence is placed before us and we will consider your comments in making that. And if you do require a written answer to that particular supplementary, then we will seek to get that for you. Do you wish to have that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Are there any member questions? No. So it brings us to item 62, St Crispin's Leisure Centre. Who will be speaking on this from the executive? Graham, thank you.
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can say a few words by way of introduction. So first of all, kind of the beginning of this process is that Executive considered a report in the context of the changing leisure landscape and other options that were available to them, and they were listed in the report. So it's right and proper that the council considers the best overall use for this specific site in the context of the best use for the community. So Executive agreed to the consultation, and the consultation response has been provided in the report. Now, the report has been produced by officers, in particular myself and Helen Watson, the Director of Children's Services. And as officers, this is simply a collection of the impacts, financials, benefits, other service pressures, costs, all available information to inform an executive decision later on in the month. It is not a decision. It is simply the officers putting together all available intelligence. Obviously, overview and scrutiny's consideration of that paper and any other relevant factors will be pertinent to being passed on to executive to inform their decision later on in the month. And it's the council's responsibility to, in the round, make the judgment as to the best future use of this site. So I don't think I want to add anything more than that into other than the results of the consultation are included, as are many other factors around service pressures. Obviously, in particular, there's a strong focus on the need for education places, and the other options as well have been appraised as well. I have Helen is on the line, as is Ming. Ming is on the line as well. So representing the education considerations around the service requirements. And we have our most senior representative from leisure, from an officer perspective, is Peter Kilkenny to my left here. And I know that both Ian, Shendon and Prue Bray, as the respective councillors that will obviously want to give their views from their particular portfolio perspective in the context of this paper in your considerations.
Thank you, Graham. So before we go and start asking questions about and asking the other staff to give their input, I just want to identify that the context of what we're here for. So the purpose of the report: in June 23, the Council's executive gave approval for a public consultation on the future of St Crispin's Leisure Centre, including the option of closing the leisure centre and considering all potential options for the future use of the site. At its meeting on 30th November 23, the executive will consider a report setting out findings from the public consultation and the feasibility of 5 options identified for the future of the leisure centre. The 30th of November executive report is appended to this covering. So the committee will consider the attached executive report on the future of St Crispin's Leisure Centre and make recommendations as appropriate to the executive at its meeting on the 30th of November. So that's the objective of this committee's actions today, is to consider this report for any recommendations or observations we wish to make to the executive. So where do we start? I think if I could have not leisure, yes, no, sports, leisure, the leisure perspective from the officer's side. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Graham, for that. Evening, everyone. Good evening.
I guess this is twofold. This is about educational places for young people during the next 5 years. The report sets that out and sets the conditions which are required, but equally balancing, as Graham's alluded to already, balancing the community needs against the educational needs. And we have a contractor in place, a partnership in place, which has another 10 years with our operator, Places for Leisure. And we have now set out a range of conditions with Places for Leisure to ensure that they can both deliver during the next 10 years across the existing estate and potentially develop other services as well as part of that broader leisure offer. And as Graham's again has already alluded to, there are significant financial pressures within the leisure industry. We have managed to secure an agreement with Places for Leisure, in particular around the contractual issues, if the recommendations are agreed this evening or presented to executive of the closure of St Crispin's to balance that community need, excuse me, against educational places, that Places for Leisure will still allow some form of recreational sporting use, in particular squash provision. So there is very much a balance here, Chair, and that balance, as I'm sure colleagues Helen, Ming, etc. will consider later on, around the educational needs and the leisure provision needs. There has been, Chair, and again the report makes that very clear, there has been a significant decline in usage post-pandemic and the opening of our new £22 million Wokingham / Carnival Leisure Centre. And that's fact. And the data insight and the intelligence we have from Places for Leisure, that's very clear. So the patterns of use and that usage has changed. And we as operators need to be very clear on that. So there are pressures to better utilise against the competing demands of the educational places. So I guess, Chair, for us, it's a case of that balancing need between existing provision and can this be accommodated elsewhere. For example, there are 20 classes currently participated at St Crispin's. All of those, Chair, will be accommodated at the new carnival. So the users of the site, yes, there will be a disruption potentially, but they can be accommodated at the new leisure centre against the competing needs of the extra places for children's services. So, Chair, I guess that in a round says what the report attempts to present, that balance of community needs as against educational places, and also the contractual needs of our operator Places for Leisure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that response. Graham, who's next? Was it?
Ming or Helen?
Yeah, because I haven't got the right glasses on, so I can't see the name. So I'll trust you to come up with the right name for me. Helen, thank you.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I think the report clearly sets down the educational challenge and opportunity here. So the leisure centre is located on a dual-use site with St Crispin's School. The school has grown in size hugely since opening in 1953, with some new teaching accommodation added over the years. However, some important core facilities have altered little since the school opened. And the school originally was a small secondary modern. It didn't at that point offer courses leading to public examinations. It is now growing towards being a 1,500 place school with a sixth form and a very diverse curriculum offer, and a designated exam and assessment centre that does require space to meet the relevant regulations. I think everyone in the committee is aware that there are some school place planning challenges in Wokingham, and we've been working closely with the school around the opportunity that could be offered there. I think the options are set clearly down in the report, and I know that Ming has been very closely involved with the school in discussions, and he's on the call also this evening. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ming, do you have anything you wish to deliver to the committee?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Helen already summarized it really well in terms of place need, the challenging facing working as a place, facing the community is that we have huge challenge
Sorry, Ming, can you put your camera on?
My camera is on. Can you see me at all?
Oh, it's not coming up this end, that's all. Okay,
Let me
no, don't worry, Ming, sorry.
Is it showing or not?
It's okay, Ming. We know it's you. You can carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to highlight that the challenge our school place shortage, particularly secondary school year 7 challenge, is huge working on, which can be costly to working on as a place, and also for local community. Just now, college just said place need was school place need. School place need, both are community need. I would like to say that. And then DFEs estimate that for every pupil, actual pupil place, local will cost council 26K on average, like across the country. And St. Crispin already offer us over 100 places with the expectation that we will invest some money in the school. And in next 5 years, with any actual support, schools are ready to offer 55 places each year. So you take all this into account. The calculations give us a picture that if we can agree to this option, our school make use of the leisure center while still opening up some facility for the community, like squash club, etc., is the most efficient use of council resources, and the local community will benefit from this option. That's purely from education perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ming. So if I can ask executives if you would like to make any comments, who would like to, if anybody would. Thanks, Ian.
Obviously, we were presented with a situation where usage of St. Crispin's Leisure Centre was declining, and across all aspects of use. That, for example, included badminton, which we knew had recovered from the pandemic to pre-pandemic levels in all our other centres and indeed across the UK. We were also presented with a situation where there was an increasing emphasis on aspects of running the school on the same site. There's security aspects because the school has no perimeter fence, as for example, if you go to Maiden Early, you have to actually pass through an electronically controlled gate, having announced your presence. That's not possible with the current configuration of St. Crispin's. There were also safeguarding issues of having pupils actually in the building at St. Crispin's having to change in the school to go across to the leisure centre at the same time as any combination of adults could have been in the leisure, in other parts of the leisure centre.
Sorry, could we? It's hard to concentrate when somebody else is talking at the same time as Ian.
Well, if the councillor doesn't want to listen, that's his choice. And taken into consideration those things, that information that we had in midsummer, it was considered appropriate to start a consultation on the future use of the St. Crispin's asset. I don't know if Prue would like to add anything to that.
I have a couple of things I think I probably want to add. I listened very carefully to Mr. Fellowes' question at the beginning, and it's possible we could have done more to invite people to fill out the consultation than we did, but the consultation was open to the public and we did hold some sessions for the public to attend. What I would say coming out of it, I've got the school itself and the trust responded to the consultation, and it may help those of you who are in the room if I just read you out from, this is the St. Crispin's school response. And almost the last paragraph of it says, should the leisure centre be gifted to the Circle Trust and St Crispin's School, we would like to continue this work, meaning community events, with the local community and provide facilities for interested groups such as a squash club. So I think it's not the end. Sometimes you have to make very difficult choices, and we've got two competing things. We've clearly from the consultation got some of the people who are current users of the centre who don't really want to go somewhere else. And I don't think that, we should ignore that completely, and we can try and redeliver that. We can't, I think as Peter outlined, we've got a contract with our leisure provider, which doesn't allow us to, as it says in the report, to offer things which compete with what they offer, but they don't offer squash. So there's not a competing offer. The school's quite happy to host all the other events that it has at the weekends. I think there's an antiques fair and all sorts of other things. So they've got footballs, lots of other things. It's during the school day that it won't be available. And in fact, in the summer term, this term for 6 weeks, it wasn't available because they had to use it as an exam centre. So it's already a pressure that's known about. But I do think it's not a complete either or. There is the ability to provide at least some of what is currently offered in the centre, while also enabling us to get these secondary school places, which I hope everybody appreciates we really badly need. So I think it's not a complete loss. It's actually a balancing act about what we can lever in that will work. And we can keep squash going by the look of it. I'm not going to promise that we absolutely can, because the school will be dealing with that, but they are expressing willingness to do so. So I think that should help the situation. And if we can look, there are other options referred to in the report as well for how else we might offer a similar sort of what do we call it, an atmosphere that's not carnival hub for people in the local area, possibly by looking at Montague Park and the community centre there. But obviously it's not commissioned yet, but it's a possibility. So I think it's not quite as bleak as perhaps people fear, but sometimes we have to make these hard decisions, and we'll have to look at it on Thursday, and we will take into account. I think the one thing I do want to say is whatever you say this evening, we will take it into account. It will be presented to the executive a week on Thursday.
Thank you, Prue. Can I take questions? Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. I found this paper extremely unclear. From what I can see, we're planning to transfer a council asset which must be worth, I don't know, Graham, 3 or 4 million, plus £1 million to a commercial organisation, which the Circle Trust is, in order to what looks like operate things in the leisure centre, which are currently they could operate in the leisure centre even if they didn't own it. I'm not clear about why we're transferring the ownership. It's the first question. I've got other concerns about it, but that's one question. I mean, it's a council asset. We've got the job of protecting council assets, and I don't understand from reading it. I can't see anything that prevents what they're suggesting, which is a dance studio, leisure exam hall, and a few other things being done just by leasing it at the appropriate times.
Graham, have you got an offer to answer that?
Yes, okay. Well, in the context of meeting statutory school places, it is a very expensive to do that is very expensive for the council, building new schools, extending schools, etc. So I think the value for money consideration should be in the context of what would we have to spend to provide that level of places elsewhere. And
Graham, you maybe misunderstood me. The question is, from what I can read from this paper, which is all I've got, the proposals are to do a whole load of things in the leisure centre, which they could do in the leisure centre if they just let it, or we gave them access to it in particular times. The school places are not being put in the leisure centre as far as I can see. So I don't understand why we're transferring an asset and giving them £1 million in order to let them have exams and run a dance studio in a leisure centre that we already own.
Right, can I just hold you there?
Okay.
Do you want to?
I would just say it's not a transfer of the asset. It's a lease. It's adding the asset to an existing lease for the Circle Trust.
Sorry, and I don't think that's what you said a minute ago.
So maybe I can shed some light. Okay. So when a school academises, the council has to hand over what was a council asset to the Academy Trust. And that's on a 125-year lease. And this will be adding the leisure centre area to that 125-year lease. With it, as far as I understand it, goes all the maintenance costs and the running and all the rest of it. So we actually, at the moment, we're responsible for the building, and places, our leisure contractor runs it for us. If we actually if we don't do it this way, and we actually did what you said, it's not just a dance studio, by the way, it's all the changing rooms and all the thing, and the exclusive use for it all day, every day during the school term. Our leisure contractor would not be able to run the things in there that they currently run. And so in terms of what practical impact it would make, it would have the same result, that we still would have to close it all during the day. And we'd still be responsible for the building. And I don't really understand the point you're trying to make. I genuinely don't, Pauline, understand why you think that would be a better option. So you'd effectively be doing exactly the same thing, but we'd still be responsible for the building.
No, it wouldn't, because we would be we would be allowing them to lease it from us during the day to use it for what they want. In the evening, it would revert to community use. The way you're doing, you're actually giving the control of a council asset to a third-party commercial organisation.
But it still is going to be open for community use in the evenings. That's what the school is committing to. But I don't.
Sorry, can I just interject there, Graham, if you want to?
I know Peter just wants to come in. I'd just say that the model will be the same as other where we undertake investment in schools and they're an academy, is we spend the council's money, and sometimes very significant sums, and then transfer it over to the school on a 125-year lease or whatever. So it will be replicating that type of education provision model.
I think the key point, Graham, is it's not education provision you're transferring, it's leisure centre. You're not transferring a school building, you're transferring a leisure centre. So you're giving them an asset which could be used for the benefit of the community, and you're handing over control of that, regardless of what you might think, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's not a school. It's different from an academy transfer where you're transferring classrooms and all that sort of stuff. It's transferring a current community asset to the ownership of a commercial organisation on a 125-year lease.
Just before I bring Peter in, I think the first point is an important education one. So it's about what the school needs to deliver its statutory responsibilities, and therefore why it would need that space. Ming, can you add light on the fact of it would no longer be a leisure centre, it will be an integral part and a required part of the statutory education provision?
Yes, of course. Can you see me at all?
Still not, but we do know it's you.
I can see myself. I don't know why. Let me just try to. Okay. Yeah, it's just I would like to stress the point that school's intention, after the consultation, I did have some discussion with the school to see what they think in the response to the consultation. They want to turn this into actual education facility. By doing that, they will increase the teaching space, classrooms, sports facility, or any facility that will increase classroom directly or indirectly. So it will no longer be a leisure facility anymore. And school, of course, also they will not be running that as a commercial place to rent out, etc. Same as another constructor who run that place. So what I would like to say is the school will, if they were given that lease, they will turn it into a teaching space, education facility, in not a leisure center.
Could somebody possibly point to me to where that says that in this paper, because I've not seen it?
I think, can I say that I think when we add the education content, possibly we just need, we might who need to strike a balance because there are very options in it. It's about how much information we need to be put in the paper. It can be very, very lengthy, and then you can totally bias the information toward education in a report, while we want to leave space and equal weight to other options.
Chair, could I add to that?
Please, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just to clarify, I think it does indicate that in the report that the existing changing facilities will be utilised for additional class facilities. The key here is the fitness centre, essentially, and the current existing use of St Crispin's, just to clarify for members, and apologies if it's not particularly clear in the paper, that to be absolutely clear, the existing use of the centre is exclusive with the exception of the sports hall. That is the educational site. So they use that currently in the daytime. Then 5 o'clock, 4:30, it comes over to our operator places for leisure. Okay. So in the daytime, both squash facilities and the fitness centre is available for anyone to access. That will significantly change with these proposals. So there is a difference. And also, as my colleagues cited there, the existing fitness centre, the attractive commercial viable offer for our operator places will go. So to answer the member's question, there is a significant difference to the site. Completely different. Completely different. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got the order of hands that went up. David, if you'd like to ask a question. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong person. I told you the glasses were made.
Yeah, shooting on Specsavers. I have a certain sympathy with Mr. Fellowes' question at the start of this. And I do think a large part of the debate here is around presentation. In the early stages of this discussion, and I think the way the consultation was put together, the context was we have a leisure facility with declining usage. What should we do with it? Clearly, the main driver here, and one that I totally applaud and support, is we have a desperate need to expand St Crispin's School to accommodate more children. How best can we achieve that? And I think I do not understand why that didn't come forward in the consultation, because I think if it had, we would be having a very different discussion, and I think possibly a slightly easier one. So there's something in there to learn about presentation and consistency and what argument and case we're putting forward. Because I repeat myself, I think the case for expanding St Crispin's School is rock solid, and I totally support it. And therefore, the debate and this report comes about is how do we mitigate that for the use of the leisure centre. So I hope some lessons can be learned about presentation in that. In terms of the other key issue, which is the interests of those users of this facility who have no other place to go, the squash players, and what we're talking about, I think we can all support the idea that users have moved to St Crispin's to the Carnival Hub, and that's a great new facility, and this old one has declined. We understand that. But the issue here is largely, maybe not exclusively, but largely around the squash community. I would be far happier if this report had come forward to this committee with some concrete, solid proposals about how that gets carried forward. There are some ideas in here, but the presentation, the wording here, and indeed some of the discussions tonight is we hope, or we think, or Circle Trust are going to talk about it. I wouldn't wish to be unduly cynical, but this has shades of some of the discussions we've had with Bohunk School on similar issues. And I do not understand why we can't now, if this is such an important deal, as it clearly is, and which we should support, then I don't understand why we can't nail those details down in advance with Circle Trust, who clearly want to get this deal put in place as quickly as possible, so that everybody concerned has some better clarity and some better degree of certainty than we currently do.
Thank you, David. Peter, sorry, my mistake, Marie. I do apologise.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to get people to take part in this consultation. So I feel quite idiotic now seeing how people's contribution to it is being dismissed. I agree that sometimes it's a question of presentation, but I have only heard the phrase, a consultation is not a referendum, when the public have failed to reach the conclusion that people in power wanted them to reach. Yeah. So I think we should take seriously the questions that have arisen about the nature of the consultation and why, given this, why in the future anybody would care to take part in a consultation. Yeah, because I would find it difficult to convince people to take part, given that people's very clear responses have been effectively dismissed. Yeah, for reasons that might be good, but reasons that were certainly not included in the first place, in the initial phase. The second is about the trust. Yeah, and about I find it quite disingenuous to say these things about hoping and looking to the trust to, we are effectively handing over a community asset, an asset that was built and maintained with the money provided by people in this community. We're handing it over and we have no control in the future. You know, Circle Trust is one thing, but things happen. Yeah, the trust could get taken over by an entirely different entity, blah, blah, blah. Lots of things could happen. There is no security for the things that we are proposing. Yeah, and we have to be clear about that. We have to be clear about that, you know, with our residents and also with ourselves. And it's not simply, and, you know, this does represent a service cut. Yeah, we should be honest. It does represent a service cut, and it's not simply squash players. It is also older, vulnerable, and not so vulnerable users of the Shine exercise classes, for example. They will not go to the carnival pool. I mean, I've talked to them, they won't go. If this goes forward, that's the end of exercise for them. And so when we're looking at these service cuts, you know, rather than looking at them as savings, we should recognise that they do represent a real impact on the vulnerability and the well-being of people in this community who did, after all, paid for their creation and their maintenance.
Please, Graham.
Yeah, just coming back on some of those points. If it's the executive's decision to transfer to the school, there will be a contract in place, and that contract will have stipulations, legal requirements that the school must meet, and one of those, for example, would be not to breach the competition clause that we have with Places Leisure, amongst other expectations we might have. One can question, well, how well will we be able to enforce? But it will be with the best legal rigour and us asserting our legal rights, regardless of whether it's Circle Trust or a successor. So I think that's important. There will be legalities around this transfer to assure its best possible community use in the round. On the point of the consultation, I think it's reasonable to say if without the consultation and the understanding of the requirements and passion for various facilities, I suspect there wouldn't be the option of the school continuing to run squash. Also, the exploration of Montague Park as an alternative, and indeed looking to accommodate activities, for example, in the box fit or the carnival hub where that's appropriate. So although if it is the executive's decision to transfer, although it wasn't carried out as a vote, it was certainly would be very cognitive and doing all we can do to accommodate those the responses from the consultation.
I'll go first this time. So I do slightly resent, sorry about this, the fact that you're claiming that we've ignored their responses, because it seems to me that the only thing then that would satisfy you would be to keep it open as it is, because that's the largest view that came out of the consultation. But if we're going to do that, what are we going to do about the secondary school places? We've got to balance things. So if the committee is going to make a recommendation to do that, then I think we'd need some steering on what we should do about the secondary school places at the same time. But I don't think that is what we're trying to propose. We are trying to keep the community facilities and the leisure things as much as we possibly can. I find it I don't want to keep using the phrase, but we have to use it. A consultation is not a referendum. We've learned a lot from this consultation, and among the things we've learned is that the school is happy to keep the squash club going. So there are lots of things that will be written into the legal agreement when we hand over the school, not least, I mean, some of them are referred to, they're keeping it as a polling station, because that is the most convenient place for people to go to vote. But we can't, we've got 2 more weeks nearly to go, a week and a bit, however long it is, to bottom out some of this stuff. So if you want to make recommendations about firming up things to do with what the school needs to commit to, I'm sure we can listen to those. I'm not going to promise you we can deliver all of them immediately, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to put those things in place. But the willingness, I do believe that the willingness is there on the part of the school if we move forward in this direction. The Circle Trust is a Wokingham-based trust, and so far they have held up everything they have committed to with us over the years. They have done. So it's not a bow hunt situation, I think, which was very difficult negotiations. This is not quite the same. So I on their behalf, I think I need to defend their reputation slightly. But I mean, I do understand. I understand that people who are used to using a leisure centre want that facility to continue, and I would rather not sit here and have to say to you, no, it won't be exactly as it was before, because people are always going to be upset by that kind of thing. But sometimes you have to make choices, and if I don't know, when we get to the meeting, we will consider everything that you say as a committee. But my inclination at the moment is that we've got a report and we need to look at the report, and anything you can add to it, and we will consider it on the night. And I think that I'm sure Chris is capable, as he was last time you had a review which was about the litter bins, of presenting what Overview and Scrutiny Committee come to as a conclusion, so that we can take it into consideration.
Thank you. Yeah.
If I could add to that, I would emphasise that we have taken things. I've read the verbatims, I've read the responses to the consultation, and 2 things came to me strongly. Firstly, the importance of the squash players attached to the centre. We kind of expected that. But what was unexpected was the regard in which the centre is held by particularly older users of some of the classes, that they felt comfortable in that environment and they felt intimidated by Carnival Hub, or they felt that they couldn't walk there and it was not environmentally friendly to drive to Carnival Hub. Some simply said they just didn't like the Carnival Pool car park. And I don't. I have to tell you, that's probably one of the worst design multi-stories I've ever tried to negotiate. But I got those two things very strongly from the consultation. It's not fair to say that we didn't actually take anything from the consultation. We did. I wasn't party to any discussion with the Circle Trust, but I can imagine that people didn't want to go to be too definitive, too firmed up before a decision was brought to a broader audience within the council.
Thank you, Ian. It's Peter next, then.
Yeah, this is probably touching on some of the stuff we've already asked about, and this is community activities. I know we do have a bunch of different ones going on. For example, last week there was an announcement for pickleball coming to St Crispin's Centre. So what I'm thinking about is how do we ensure that the Circle Trust do make their commitment to provide facilities. And I know, for example, they do have netball, they have that on a Tuesday night, so they do provide facilities. So just make sure that we have that in our contracts.
Yeah, if I can just try to, again, as Graham's alluded to, some reassurance within the contract we have, that would be insisted as part of the contractual issues. But again, if that can be accommodated elsewhere within the new carnival, that's what we will do. We will advocate that through our operator places. But that's a fair point. It's a fair challenge. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Charles.
Thank you. I had a few questions just to understand some of the finances behind this. The first thing is there's a reference that the council's proposing a funding of £1 million for the trust to enable them to adapt the leisure centre for the provision of agreed extra school places until 2029. I was wondering why 2029? Does it mean there's a financial liability beyond that? Or is there a specific reason it is that?
Chair, if I may, and Helen Ming, please excuse me if I've got this wrong, but my understanding of that, Chair, is that it's for 5 years. The pressure is for 5 years and it's an extra 55 places each year up until 2029. Please, Helen or Ming, if I've got that wrong.
I'm sure Helen can answer that, but yes, there's a bulge pressure and the pressure will go away.
There is. Prue's very precisely right in what she said. Yeah, thank you.
May I follow that up then by asking what happens after 2029? You know, if the school doesn't need the provision, why are we transferring this?
We're not necessarily saying it doesn't need it. We're just saying that the upward pressure will stop. We think. I mean, it's not an exact science. I'll tell you that because we've had a lot of inward migration as well, which has also pushed numbers up. So, yeah, but the best guess at the moment is that we don't have. You're seeing it at the bottom of schools at the moment in infants. There is not enough children to fill all the infant classes, and that's making a difference. That's why we had to open the new Matthews Green School, St Cecilia's, as a junior school because there weren't enough children to go round in the infants. So it will eventually work its way out, we think, but there will be additional housing and there'll be other things going on, which, you know, we don't have a crystal ball, but this is our best guess.
So I understand that, but just for clarity, that means do you anticipate from where we're sitting now, there'll be further funding required after 2029 to maintain those places?
And Helen wants to answer this, but I can't predict where we will exactly be in 2029. But we have a limited number of secondary schools, so it is likely that facilities will have to be upgraded in at least one of them, or not two of them. But I can't tell you which ones particularly. But yes, there will be a pressure on because that's how school is. Even if there weren't more children, there would probably be buildings that needed new labs or new things. A lot of that money, though, if it's new replacement things, comes from the Education Skills and Funding Agency because they're academies, and so they they get funding from that source as well. But where it's additional places, we have to help fund them because it's our statutory responsibility.
And sorry,
Oh,
Chairman,
sorry.
if I could just add that the report does cite the fact that the population overall is expanding from the region of 170,000 to 200,000. There will be extra children that need to be educated. We don't exactly know where, but overall in the system, you would expect pressure.
Just a couple of other things about costs on here. There's a note that there's going to be a draw or cost for the Leisure Management Equalisation Fund, but there's no figure in here. Do we have a ballpark of what that figure might be?
The reason why I've said that is, and I can only disclose so much because this is a public meeting and this is a commercial negotiation that we're talking about. But obviously, Places Leisure have been great in terms of their partnership with us and taking on new facilities, for example, the Boxing Hub. This is obviously something going the other way, but there'll be disbursements of activities from here to other Places Leisure sites, and indeed Places Leisure, we hope, will have a presence if we can make the Montague Park option, bring that into life. We have a commercial contract which involves a gain share, and my hope and assessment is that there will be very little impact on the overall calculation, and that's all part of the negotiations and discussions we're having with Places Leisure. But I'm not expecting that to be substantial in the context of the overall contract and the life of the equalisation fund. Therefore, it was impossible to put a figure on it, and it's something we're continuing to work in our partnership way with Places Leisure on.
Okay, thank you for that. You may have touched upon my next question, which was there's another reference in here to the contract, and WBC gets income from profit share from this contract. And what will the effect on that be? Because I'm assuming, even though usership is down here, that Places for Leisure are making some money off this building.
Yeah.
That's all part of the discussions. I can't disclose specifics.
Okay, I mean, fair enough, but you're asking us to assess, well, not you personally, but we're being asked to assess this document financially without some of the information.
What I'm saying to you through this report is that because of the equalisation fund and the way it works, and there's lots of throwing to and from in terms of upside and downside in terms of it, if this was transferred, then the impact to the council taxpayer would be zero, because whatever its impact would be dealt with through that equalisation fund. And we may well not know the overall impact of all the toing and froing in terms of the expansion of activities or the falling away of activities. We may not know that till the end of the contract in 10 years?
10 years.
10 years time. So any variation will be dealt with through the equalisation fund, and we will, through our negotiations, make it as financially beneficial for the council as possible in the round, which includes not just this particular decision.
Okay, thank you. I want to cover two other quick things, Chair, if you'll oblige me. I'm happy to wait till after. Prue mentioned earlier the possibility of some leisure facilities being available at this centre. There's been reference to Montague Park in the paper. You've just mentioned it yourself, Graham. My question was, how is that going to work? Somebody's going to be paying for that. Somebody's going to have to be managing that. You know, I know from having children involved in sports clubs and sports facilities that if it's outside of school hours, you know, the teachers aren't going to do it. So I just appreciate an answer on that.
Chair, if I may attempt to answer that. It's very much a balance, that, Chair, because we've visited Montague. It's above Montague Community Centre, there is residential property. So we are somewhat restricted of what we can actually participate in the building. We've visited with places. I have to say, as Graham again has talked about, we've got a really strong partnership now. The conditions for that partnership is really strong. They are really keen to exercise that option to go into Montague Park, but we need to look at the commercials and what that will be. But I have to say, Chair, it is somewhat restricted because of the building. It's 200 square metres, but actually the physical asset makes it extremely difficult to participate in what would be leisure activity. Certainly potential community hub, some form of exercise chair, etc. But a singing, dancing type activity fitness centre, no, because we've got essentially residents above the building. But we're doing our best on that, Chair, to accommodate. Please, Sean.
Montague Park Leisure Centre, as you're probably familiar with, is a vexed question that the council, I don't want to be too political, but under a previous administration had agreed the leisure centre. The leisure centre is surrounded by, well, it's got a co-op next to it, hasn't it? It's got flats upstairs. It's supposed to be a community centre. It's not fitted out at all. It's just bare walls. And a commuted sum was passed to the council as part of it, which doesn't really cover the cost of all the things that need to happen. And it's been going round the council trying to work out how to make it into a community centre and get some community use into it for some years. And this is another thing that we can put into that mix to try and help with the financing of it, to make it work more. So I would feel uncomfortable promising you that Montague Park will become a places leisure hub. There are activities that could be done in there, which are things that they would run, like yoga classes or Pilates or things like that, which don't have loud music. There are lots of other things we could put in there, but it has to work as a package. And trying to get a package together is proving quite difficult, and proved quite difficult for several years. It's not a recent difficulty, but this is one more thing we can put into the mix that to help create that community centre that we need to create, because it's not really fair to the people that have moved into Montague Park and thought they were getting a community centre and haven't got one yet. So I think probably that's about as far as we could go on that, the willingness to look at it and see if we can make it work as part of something else.
You okay, Charles? Please.
One, if I may. It's just about how secure this arrangement would be with other trusts in the area. I note what you said about the Circle Trust, but I remember very clearly walking around Bohunt School 5 or 6 years ago with Ben Godper and Neil Stowger, the head of the trust. And this was around the time the Arborfield Leisure Centre was opening, basically with the shared arrangements between the public and the school, and them telling me many, many things about why it was unsafe to have the public in the same area as the school children, and safeguarding this, safeguarding that, safeguarding everything else. And I have a real, knowing how some of these trusts behave, and I'm not singling out Bohunt, they're private sector, aggressive beasts, they'll want to take advantage of opportunities. That if this happens here, what safeguards do we have of it not happening at Bullmarsh, at Bohunt, it not happening at other places?
Because we're not going to give them it. So I think that's probably, I mean, Bullmarsh is a different case. Obviously, they're academising at the moment, but you've got Oakbank with the Rice Green Leisure Centre next door. They have use of some of that, but they're not looking to take it over. Places for leisure operate that, and they're talking to each other about the school's use and public use. And we have other facilities like that. I mean, we have a number of what you might call community assets on school sites. At the time most of them were built, academies were not even a twinkle in somebody's eye. And so we have to make the best of what we've got with assets on sites that, you know, there's a number of them. But we as a council have control on the whole over whether we hand them over or not. It's our decision, and it has to make sense for our residents as a whole. Schools can push, obviously they can push, but we just have to resist.
Thank you. No, we've got 4 people who wish to ask questions, so Laura, you're next. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. There's huge gaps of information missing from this report, which I'd expect to see in it, such as it talks about usage being down, but doesn't compare it to other leisure centres in the borough. as well as neighbouring authorities as well. It doesn't say if the leisure centre is profitable, as well as there's no full financial impact, which Charles talked about, and also more widely, as Marie-Louise talked about, of well-being and impact on others in the borough. If usage is down, what have we done to try to get it up? It doesn't say if we've done any PR and marketing to try to increase footfall. And also it's very much framed as school places are the most important thing. We talk about balance, but this report seems completely imbalanced as importance as school places, and that's it. There's no analysis in the report as to if this is the right school and the right site for more school places. It may well be, but I don't know because it doesn't have this in the report at all. Also, we've talked about we don't know what's going to be offered to residents in the way of leisure facilities. It's quite contradictory in the report of there'll be some things, but then there won't be other things. And it's very vague at the moment. We need it to be more specific. I know it won't all be ironed out for definite, but we need something so we can be more informed and residents can know what's going on. With the consultation, there were options which were given, but then the report says that they're not feasible. So it begs the question, why were they asked in the consultation in the first place? And then it does talk about investment in St Crispin's Leisure Centre, but then says there's no money. But there's no question as to, do residents want more investment? Is to a reason to keep going? Is it needed? There's just so many gaps. And usually we get reports which are so full of information. We complain that they're huge, but this is just really bare bones. And how anyone can make an informed decision, I don't know. But really, this report is just not good enough, and it needs a lot more information.
Thank you. Just to go firstly on Ruth's point, I mean, schools certainly do push, and you can't blame them for trying, but certainly with both Bowhunt and Bulmers, when we were dealing with those leisure centres, there was a lot of pressure to do things differently from what we ended up doing. We had to resist strenuously. And I feel in this case, we're just kind of caving in to the school. And I think it's a community facility that should be retained for the community. There must be other ways of dealing with what the school need. In terms of the leisure facility, they've already got access to it. So if there's other things, then surely there are other ways that this could be done. Is St Crispin's the right place to be providing these extra school places? Should it be somewhere else? Can we use any of the other buildings round about for some of the activities? Perhaps the old library or even Shoot End that we're trying to find things to use for. So I just think, again, there are all sorts of, this throws up so many questions for me rather than providing the answers. Specific question, in terms of squash, if the trust is willing to continue with squash provision, what times of day is that squash provision going to be available? And I'd like to go back to the Places Leisure contract. We've got a sort of non-compete clause with Places Leisure. And I've heard tonight that with the school is still, if it takes over this facility, is going to be still providing community activities in the evenings and so on. How does that sit with Places Leisure in terms of competition?
Chairman, is it best that we first start with Prue and Helen and Ming to talk about the education requirements and how they need to be met, and then we'll talk about the commercials and what have you around the leisure.
I'm very happy for Helen and Ming to give you exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure that almost every secondary school in the borough is already putting on additional places. So the deal we came to with Bowhunt for their sixth form includes year 7 places and school. We've got I can see Ming's on there. I'm sure he's mentioned we've got Pigott expanding. We've got everything. So Ming, explain.
Sorry, members. I just realized the council automatically cut off my internet. If I stayed the day for too long, that's why you couldn't see me just now. My apology. I think I found out what the problem was. So I'm back now. Yeah. As Councillor Brace just said, I think I came to working on the first task. I really the member and senior management said how we can resolve this almost like a crisis presented to the council with all 1,000 year 7 places shortage in the next few years. And we explored all options. I think probably before my time, my predecessor already started. All options be explored. Most of them are very costly. I would like to say very costly. And then school, I think I had just now colleagues member saying that we're not sure whether those trust they are independent entity, how they can work with us. I believe since in past few months we have a much stronger partnership with the school, and school recognize local community needs for actual school places in secondary school. They really work really hard to create more classroom, more teaching places for us. And I myself actually walk around all the school, try to find out which there's any space they can create it. So I have said all options have been explored. While the other option is still available, I think we have some other alternative in terms of St. Crispin and Embrook that's in the Circle Trust, but they are all far more expensive to the community and to the council. And obviously this is one option to be explored. When I have a conversation with the trust, I will be very careful during the consultation. I didn't talk too much because I know that I shouldn't enter that kind of material conversation with the school about the consultation. But then say volunteer information out of the consultation, they come up with all those ideas. They are willing to be part of community solution. If community needs space, they will work out. I don't know exactly. I can't elaborate more how exactly they're going to do it, but they are willing to explore further with the community for the community to use the space in the appropriate time. What I really would like to stress is that working on facing the huge challenge our school face. When I even talk to other authority, although some local authority area, the offer place just too far away. Like last week, I had a colleague from Brighton. How does that? Can you bus walking on people to Brighton? They have spaces, and he just it was like joke, like a joke. But what I'm saying, we explore all options available to us. Just now, also heard the question as to why 2029, 2030 academic years, because our forecasting indicate our peak need is for next 5 years. We believe, based on our forecasting, I think the inward migration, I think possibly peak in the past 2 years, but pupil number is still phased into different year group. So that's how we project future place need, which told us in next 5 years, our place need for secondary school is huge. So we must find a solution. And also, as good practice, you normally need to plan 5% actual places so that the council wouldn't into any crisis management sort of measure when the placement need emerge. So that's what we try to do it more sort of value for money way. And when I heard the trust saying that they said that they are based in the community, they want to pay attention to community need, they want to listen to whatever local communities will tell them, and they will try the best while they will make any legal arrangement, binding arrangement with local authority to make sure they promise what they did to do will be hardwired through the binding legal arrangement that I think we will do. I think they would like to do that as well to make sure what they promise to internal place, actual places in the next 5 years, and other commitment like not compete with our place Asia contractor, also to offer the place space for community use would be in our legally binding contractual arrangement. That's what I have heard from the trust. I would like to share with you. Unfortunately, I could not include all this in the report because nothing has been agreed to. There's just a commitment. The trust chief executive have outer consultation, have discussed with officers. So to sum it up, the placement needs is acute. We're working on. If we do not find a solution, the cost to local resident, to local community, and to the borough will be huge. The inflation, just now quote figure, our actual prices. That's just for expansion, not for new build. For the new build, even more expensive. And then the inflation, this is the calculation done last year. This year can be, I imagine, will be much higher. So I just stop there. I just want to highlight the place need, and the alternative has been explored, and the alternative will be more expensive.
Thank you for that background, Ning. Thank you. Alistair. Sorry.
So I know Pauline wants to ask a question, which I'll. So Pauline first, but I just wanted to, after Pauline's asked the question, for Ming to come back on what happens if we don't meet our statutory places, because I think that's an important thing for the commission to understand. And then we'll go and answer the leisure-related questions, because Peter's very keen to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
And is your question related to this particular question that's going on at the moment? Yes, please, sir.
I think so, anyway. So what I understand is I understand the problem with school places. What I understand is we're proposing to transfer for 125 years or whatever's left of the lease, a leisure centre that I don't know what it's worth. I have no idea. I don't know, 5 million, 6 million, something like that. I don't know, maybe less. Plus spending £1 million on refurbishment of a weights room. And we're transferring complete control of that for that period to a private trust in order to allow them to convert a weights room into a classroom, and also free some changing rooms in the building to allow a little bit more classroom space and deliver in total 50 spaces. I think that's what I've just heard. What other options were looked at on site to make those very small capacity? Because it feels to me like you're transferring an elephant in order to provide a tail. And I'm just wondering what other options were looked at. Were porta cabins looked at? Were other options of other places within the school looked at? What else did you look at, Ming?
Just before I hand over to Ming on that, it's worth recognising that through previous commitments and delivering on commitments of additional places has created an overflow, an overcapacity. So it's not just about the additionality of 55. They are already over provided and have to make lots of let's say undesirable compromises from education perspective. So that's kind of just the almost like the additionality on top of plenty that's gone before, that's kind of brought the pressure that's currently on that facility.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I understand the problem. Yep. I'm just concerned about losing complete control of a council asset to solve a problem, and how else we might have looked at solving it.
Ming,
yeah.
Do you want to come
So-
back on that and then also pick up the impacts
Yeah.
of if we don't manage to meet our statutory provision?
In terms of the place somewhere else, we could not find any physical place alternative to St. Crispin Leisure Centre within that physical space. In terms of how to use that space, just now we talked about creating teaching space, not necessarily all teaching as classrooms in that leisure center. Can be other education facility move from the St. Crispin's leisure center into a leisure center, and then the space in the main side, when I say main side, I mean the school current side, can be reconfigured into classroom. So it can be directly create classroom in the leisure center or indirectly created more teaching places. That's something for leisure center for trust to consider. Of course, we will have influence. You member have particular view, whatever. Anything we need to write into the contract that there's a certain way we should influence how they convert the space or reconfigure the place into actual teaching spaces directly or indirectly. We should still have that influence. We can still say now. In terms of legal implications, local authority, I mean, that means you as member or the senior officer, we have a legal responsibility to provide local community sufficient places. So all residents, their children, the young people in the family would demand that right to have sufficient places being provided by the council. Yeah, that's written in the Education Act.
So Ming, what other places did you look at apart from this leisure centre?
Can I answer that bit on the site? Because I have got a piece of paper here which tells me. So,
shame it wasn't in the paper.
Well, it's not directly related to the leisure centre bit, but there is a history of the school expanding. So in March 2022, there was a planning application for additional temporary classrooms, and in May 22, there was permission given. Part of the issue is that they can't use the changing facilities in the current leisure centre, so they had to repurpose some classrooms that should have been classrooms for changing rooms. So if they can get the leisure centre, they can use those changing rooms, and they can then move the classrooms back to being classrooms. But they have a problem on the St. Crispin site because it's a listed building. I don't know whether you're aware of that. So it's a very complicated history, which causes nightmares for the planning committee when it comes to it, because there are certain things that are not allowed to change around the tower block and those kind of things. So they've already got additional modular classrooms. I'm not a fan of teaching in porta cabins. We had enough of that when I was at school. It's better to have a better building. They also needed an expanding dining room area because the dining room can only take half the number of children. So there's all sorts of overflow issues. And the fact that they don't have an exam hall that's big enough, and that's why St. Crispin's had to be closed this summer. We've managed to avoid complete closure, I think, in previous years, but they need the space in the gym there to hold their examinations. So it was closed for the whole of the examinations period. So there's a lot of educational things that they need to do. And education isn't just about the classrooms, it's also about all the extra things that they have to have, some of which they've already got planning permission for. And there isn't a lot of usable space left because the Crispins are building next to the sixth form block at the back. But the listed building status makes it difficult on there. But everywhere, every other school, I mean, we've looked at everywhere. We're looking everywhere.
So thank you. That's helpful. I think what I'm trying to weed out is what it is about this that requires the transfer of the whole asset during the evenings and at the weekends when the school is not operating, rather than just the leasing of the required asset during the day when the school needs it for an exam hall or a changing room or whatever. And the only thing I can come down to is that weights room that is being converted into a classroom. The rest of it doesn't sound like it's anything different from what you'd do with a leisure centre anyway, and where you could do it if you gave them exclusive use to it during the day. And that's the bit I don't understand.
Can I, Chair?
Please.
Can I come in?
Please, me. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, the difference is when you create. I would say that the school already give local community over 150 actual places in past 2 years, based on understanding some extra expansion plan going to take place based on that trust. The difference is when school keep expanding, the number huge. You have more people who split into that space, and then the mixed use. I think Councillor Margaret Sattler said that school do have concern about safeguarding. Safeguarding is important. The mixed use of the adult community and the children, young people is always a concern. And they have huge. We're talking about a big increase next 5 years. Every year, 55 places. They already give us 150. You talk about over 330 places extra. School become really big. You have a lot of people that need to have more human resources to take care of the safeguarding. Also to have a clear division in terms of timing, in time management, in space management, to make sure they're safe. Otherwise, school will also fail the duty. Sometimes may be a red herring when we say the school keep safeguarding. They do have a huge sort of safeguarding responsibility. Anything go wrong, the school can be brought down. There will be a huge negative impact on local community. But what I'm trying to say that school do need to take into account safeguarding concern. So they are confident they have safeguarding control of the space and the times of the space. So that's the difference when they have a huge, much larger cohort of children, young people in that space.
Sorry, Meg, that didn't answer the question. The question is, what is there in this proposal that could not be satisfied by giving the school exclusive use to the leisure centre during the day? That solves the safeguarding problem. It solves the problem with the changing rooms. As far as I can see, it solves every problem, and it leaves the asset open for the community to use in the evening and the weekends when the school is not operating. And I still don't understand the answer to that.
Can I just pause you there, please?
Yeah.
Pauline, in that question, there's something you're missing. But if you just lease the facility back to the school to the school to use during the day, you still don't cover off 2 changing room issues that would be classrooms. It means It means the changing facilities in the main hall are still there. You can't take the changing room facilities out of the school because of other activities that go on that require the use of them as no, you can't. They can't be turned back into schools. How can they?
If it doesn't work when you give them exclusive use during the day, why does it work when you give them exclusive use 24 hours a day? It makes no sense.
So I'd quite like to ask the question standing up the other way around, but never mind. I think the reason why it works out, and we can probably get Peter to give an opinion, that we've got a declining usage of the leisure centre. So places for leisure have to be prepared to keep running it and sorting it out and whatever, and we'd have to put some investment in it. That's clear from the paper, to keep it viable as a leisure centre, which we don't actually have a budget for at the moment. But it's not. It's if you actually do that, who is going to operate the out of hours activities if places leisure can't get the income from operating the things during the day, which they do now, which is part of their package?
So have we looked at that? Because
yes,
I did talk to finance officers previously and was told that this was not making a loss as an outfit at the moment. So maybe it depends on all its daytime use to make a profit. I don't know, but as far as I can hear, there is no reason why you transfer 24/7 ownership and control of this facility to the school in order to solve the school's problems. You should be able to just transfer the daytime use. It gives them access to all the changing rooms. It gives them access to the
And
exam
how
hall.
long a lease were you considering?
Sorry?
How long a lease?
Well, I don't know. You've got 5 years
and then we need it back again. No, I mean, that's not going to give the school certainty, is it? The school's going to need that.
Well, it doesn't matter. You can make the lease as long as you like.
Let's make it 125 years and give it to the school, and then they can make sure the community use is available.
But that's pointless. Absolutely, you lose control of it then. It's completely ridiculous. You're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Conversation there, please.
Because there were quite a few questions around the leisure, the numbers, the drop-off, and whether it would be a viable proposition as just stated. So probably best Peter comes back on as many of the questions that have come in that arena.
I'll certainly try. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Chair. Just to answer the questions from Norm, if I may, from the Councillor Augustin. 2 issues around time allocation for squash and also the places for leisure contract. If I start from the places for leisure contract initially, number 2, there is a competing facility clause within the leisure contract, Chair, and that's very clear. But what we have been able to do is both consult and engage with places for leisure, and they are prepared not to invoke that clause and to allow that wider community access. So I think, if I may, Chair, credit to places for that as well. They accept the demands of the community use, and they accept that potentially can affect wider usage as well. And linked to that, Chair, and it perhaps answers some of the questions from the member there is a package of measures which, as an operator, they sell. And currently there's roughly just over 12,000 members on a direct debit membership within each of the leisure centres. So there are competing needs in each centre, but they sell that as a package, as a broad offer. So to understand the economic viability of centres is quite difficult. Daytime use currently at St Crispin's is restricted to squash provision and fitness use. Fitness use in the gymnasium is somewhat restricted. It's not that extensive, but it's difficult to determine because it's part of an overall package, what they sell as part of the 12,000 members. So positively, places, we've been able to negotiate that. It's a positive discussion and they are not prepared to invoke any competing clause. So I think that's positive. In terms of the second question from the member around the particular time for squash provision, that is still to be determined. Again, that will be part of the contractual clause. I will insist though, please, Chair, certainly from a leisure perspective, not only safeguarding issues, but safety issues as well. This cannot just be a caretaking arrangement. When people play vigorous squash, and I know from 30 years of a career in leisure centres, there are issues and risks, and we can't abdicate that responsibility, Chair. So again, that will be incumbent of us, and Graham's already mentioned to me, we will make that absolutely clear as part of any contractual issue, legal agreement, that there are both safeguarding and safety issues in place for squash players. And it's only fair, and we must recognise that. It cannot just be a caretaking facility if the executive go with the recommendation, Chair.
Sorry, does that mean that will squash be available during the day or not?
Chair, if I may, that's still to be determined. At the moment, Chair, it is available in the daytime. But again, we have to enter those negotiations with the trust and the school themselves.
So is there any restriction? You say that Places Leisure have decided that they will not invoke the non-competition clause. Are there any restrictions on what the school will be able to use the facilities for? For example, the gym will go, presumably.
Chair, if I may, yes, that's absolutely correct. The plan is, again, as highlighted in the report, the gym will go for class facilities.
We are getting on for time. There are some still people that would like to ask some questions. So we've got 3 more question options open. Alistair, if you could please.
Thanks. I'll make it short, really. Just to note that the residents of Maiden Early have lost a library and a community centre behind the security fences of Maiden Early School. So I think, you know, we need to make sure that that doesn't happen here. So it's just going back. I mean, the planning application that was passed in March this year was what, for 1,200 square metres of extra space, 8 classrooms. And I thought that was supposed to be sufficient to cover the bulge in year 7. Well, from what I remember from the planning committee, that's all.
At the time, it was thought that it possibly would, in conjunction with the other schools, but that was to provide 179 additional pupils. The offer now is 55 for 5 years. That's 275. So many more. The inward migration has been quite considerable, and that has, I think, pushed numbers up, but it's a continuing battle. So it's not only, we're not just providing these places here, we're providing them all over the place to try and address the issue. Am I allowed to go back and just talk about the squash? I think it's very unlikely that squash will be available during the school day because of the safeguarding issues, but there's no reason why it couldn't be available during the school holidays during the daytime, because they won't be requiring the premises, and weekends during the daytime and evenings during the week. But I mean, that's got to be bottomed out, and I see no reason why some of this information could not. One of your recommendations might be to provide some of this information to the executive, what's available. For example, where else have we looked for school places? That is something that could be put before the executive. Yeah, and all sorts of, you know, those kind of things would be useful to have, because clearly, if you're asking about them, you need an answer. No, it's obvious to me, but obviously I'm in it, so it's a different kind of thing. We're not seeking to try and befuddle people. We actually want to have a sensible decision made on the grounds and make sure everybody's clear about why the decision is being made and what grounds it's being made of. And if you want to put forward your idea of doing it on a different sort of lease, I mean, we can look at that, but I think it's going to be unviable, because you're going to have somebody to manage the centre if it's not the school. And how that will work, given that the offering will be different, and Places Leisure are going to be concentrating more on Carnival Hub and looking at where they can transfer other classes to.
So just to follow up
Yes.
on that, Prue, in that case,
Yes.
if you don't know who's going to operate it in the evening,
well,
who's going to operate it during the school holidays? And
the school will do it, because that's what schools do. If you look around the borough,
during the holidays.
Yeah, all schools offer their facilities in the holidays for hiring. For example, they have those camps, you know, the summer holiday camps and things like that. Schools offer their facilities quite regularly at weekends and during the holidays and in the evenings. That's they make money out of it. Well,
that is where. I'm so sorry. It was just like, that is where it will go. And I mean, I'm not saying necessarily that shouldn't happen, but we need to be, even if we start at this stage, we need to be open and straight about what is possible and what is not. And if I were on the executive of the Circle Trust, I would not want to open to community engagement. I would be looking at a way, if I had that contract in front of me, I would be looking at a way to dodge that by opening it to camps for which people have to pay, and so on. And that will, again, withdraw these facilities from the people who paid for them and need them. And, you know, maybe that is the price of what is being proposed here, but we need to be honest about it at this stage, yeah, and say, maybe that is something that we can consult about. But I cannot imagine a contract that is going to say you have to open your facilities every holiday and every Saturday and every Sunday afternoon for anybody who wants to come.
Yeah, but people already pay to go to. It's not a free service. People pay to use the leisure facilities. They join they have a membership which they pay monthly, usually, I think. Yep. So it's not a free thing. And and there are already things that go there where the charges are already set for. The Antiques Fair, which takes place on a regular basis, we have as a I don't know whether you've heard of the local offer day. So for SEND parents and things, there's an annual day where they can go and find out about things, and they hire out the hall for that. There's ballroom dancing that goes on in the school. I think there's all sorts of stuff. And all schools do that, and they charge community. So schools have tennis courts where they hire out the tennis courts at slightly less than probably you could get it in a commercial tennis club, but it's still it's a source of income for schools. They all do it all the time, and suggest it's a commercial thing. I mean, there's a benefit to having a holiday club in your school because it benefits local residents who don't know what to do with their children when they're working all day, and they've got to put them somewhere in the school holidays. So yes, there is a charge. There are also holiday clubs that the council runs, which it runs on different sites, where we have free places for disadvantaged children, and we charge other people. So there's a huge range of things that go on school sites, and it's in the school's interest to keep most of those things going because they would get an income from it. But it's not whether it's enough if you don't have the rest of it going on. For a commercial organisation to run it. I mean, Peter can, he's looking like he wants to answer that.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, thank you. Just to echo that, just answer the question, if I may. Sorry, thank you, Chair. It will not be commercially viable for places just to operate that centre from 5 o'clock on an evening till 10. There's a number of issues there, in particular the staff resource issues as well. And as I described earlier, the package of offers the commercial officers to sell is an expansive offer. If that's somewhat restricted, it's a particular challenge. Having operated centres, it's a particular challenge just to sell things essentially between 5 o'clock on an evening and 10 o'clock on an evening. It's just not commercially viable. We've entered some of the discussions with places, and that was the feedback we received, as we anticipated. Yeah.
To make sure it gets put in front of the executive before the decision. I think that's probably a job for you to do as a committee. Yeah.
I've only got, we are running quite late and we have other items to do. So we only have space for 3 more questions. So Peter.
Yeah, just a couple here. Kind of touched on it. One of the things is maintenance of the property. As I'm understanding, if it's handed over to the school, they'll then be liable for the maintenance of the building and so forth, as opposed to the council. Does that mean, say, the squash courts will be maintained to a high enough standard to make sure that they're playable on, bearing in mind the school may not be using them? And then there's the changing room facilities to make sure those are maintained to a high enough standard for the public, because there could be something odd with schools and whatever. I know with pupils, you've got 200 odd pupils going through, deteriorates. So it's to make sure it actually does stay inside. The other one really is just a question to make sure that I understand something. Option 1 talked about we haven't got £1 million to support the existing facility to upgrade it. Then option 2 mutters about giving the Circle Trust £1 million. So I don't understand the difference in the budgets there. So I'd like that to be a bit explained.
Thanks.
Okay, the council in its medium-term financial plan does have a budget provision, an ongoing budget provision that changes year on year for additional school places. So whatever happens, this decision or goes either way, we will have to undertake works in order to meet our statutory requirement for education places. And what this paper is saying is, of that budget, £1 million of that would be used for these purposes. So regardless of the outcome of the decision, there will need to be sizable capital spend to meet our statutory places. This is seen to be a cost-effective solution, as in £1 million out of that overall tranche, as opposed to something somewhat more significant. Then the other £1 million is to do with the investment that will be needed in the leisure centre to bring it up to standards. There is no provision for that £1 million. It doesn't exist. It would have to be another call on the council's capital programme, which could only be funded, given the pressures on the overall programme, if the site was to then generate additional income over and above the current baseline that will cover off the cost of borrowing, interest and capital repayment. And it is not seen, given the site and the other options that users have in the overall leisure offer, that it's not seen that that is going to be a viable proposition.
Sorry, there's the question about the maintenance and making sure that's actually done. Sorry, one of the things with maintenance is with the challenge that schools are facing with their budgets is make sure there's no sort of, sorry, we can't afford it this year to do the maintenance. So there needs to be some legal framework in there to prevent that type of thing.
Yeah, on the first point, yes, in keeping with all the other transfers to academies, yes, those maintenance costs would become theirs, and we would, I guess, the only way we can mitigate or assure around your points would be through the contractual transfer and the expectations around that. Then I suppose it would be down to any other form of enforcement in keeping with any other providers of leisure or whatever community facilities.
David.
Chair, thank you. I'm also conscious of the time. If you step back maybe from the detail, look at some of the bigger picture stuff. And I think firstly, we've all voiced concerns about some of the gaps in the report. Now, again, with hope the learnings are taken away from that and reviewed, it would have made the discussion perhaps slightly shorter this evening. I think the main thrust of this, however, is about school places. And notwithstanding comments about the report and the legislature, we are where we are with the school places. I don't think anyone's actually seriously challenging the dilemma or the huge problem the council faces. And I think we need to make that the nub of what we recommend to the executive. But equally, I think there's a lot of concerns about the council's ability to negotiate on the back of schools' contracts the provision of leisure facilities as well. I respect Prue's point of view, most eloquently put, but I also hear what Al said about Maiden Early, and I myself are still trying to unravel the mystery of the disappearing squash courts at Bowhunt. So I think our track record on that is not good. I would like to suggest that we recommend to the exec that this goes forward as a transfer to the Circle Trust, that the report comes back to this committee, maybe in 3 months, to give us an update on where we are with the contract negotiations with the Circle Trust for the provision of leisure facilities. We're being asked to take an awful lot on trust this evening. I'd be happy to do that if the council had a good track record of delivering those contracts. I don't think many of us feel that to be the case at the moment. So maybe an update back in line with your negotiations with Places Leisure, which I think are due to be completed by March 24. So an update back here on where we are, particularly and specifically on the provision of the squash court and the squash playing facilities at the school going forward.
Is this a question? No. So can I just ask, Charles had the last question, if I could ask Charles' question first.
Thank you. It was a question regarding school places, which is obviously what's driving this. I note the provision here. One thing I think, or I would like to see, if really to assess this properly, is we obviously need, I was shocked by the amount of school places we need, because I certainly didn't know that. Is there a strategic plan with all of this? We always talk when we talk in transport about people going to local schools where they don't have to travel big distances, where children can ride safely to school. I appreciate a lot of this is historic, but my understanding 4 or 5 years ago was the need was in the south and the north, basically, but not in central Wokingham. Where is the need? And with such a scale of need, rather than doing small patch additions here, there and everywhere, would it not be better to build a new somewhere?
Is that Ming or Ming, please?
Chair. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Margaret, to answer your question, we started to have strategic planning for both short-term and long-term needs. That's why I was able to just now to share with you in confidence the place need when it has been peak, when it's likely going to go down in terms of number of needs. Not just secondary school, we also want to look at primary school, although it's similarly sufficient, more sufficient, but we see some pattern in some year group. I'm not going to go into the detail, emerge in terms of equity or the sufficiency, you like. Some places may have surplus while the other less. So we can look at all those issues. I have to share with you, I'm glad I think we have now really done our research to some find the best forecasting method. We do introduce an alternative forecasting to see whether they're any better or not compared with the forecasting method we have. Based on all those better methodology, better intelligent, we have now in the making of this strategy. The first draft has been produced. We are going to check with the different expert places, health, where birth rates come from, immigration, etc., to double check our figure, and then in due time we will share with the appropriate foreign governing body and scrutiny places. Yeah, that's a positive development I would like to share with you.
Thank you, Ming.
So I was just going to come back very briefly on that. Thank you, Ming. That all sounds very encouraging, but are you saying basically this decision has been made as part of that plan, or this decision is being put forward separately and before that plan, which is what it sounded like you were saying?
Yeah, this is not part of the confirmed plan, you like. In our planning, we thought like the school already firm up with us to offer the actual place. I can give you an example, like a luxury venue that we offered actual places. We put it in a solid black, it's confirmed. Like St. Crispin, this is the line of inquiry. We put it in highlight, red, yellow line, ending on support from you, from the scrutiny committee and executive approval. So that plan will show what's been confirmed, what has not been confirmed, where the tension, which year have more need, which year both have less. Yeah, to answer your question, this is not being firmed up yet.
Thank you. Pauline, last question.
It's not a question, it's an alternative proposal.
Please.
Thank you. What I've heard is we're not clear about strategic plan for school places, and we're not clear where they're needed, but we think this is a helpful addition to the supply, which I understand. I'd like to recommend that this paper is withdrawn and reviewed to include exploration of the clear arrangements for community usage, some better protection for the assets, clarity on what happens if the demand is a bulge and comes back down again afterwards, some clarity on the operating arrangements for the holidays and outside school hours, some reinforcement of maintenance and protection for community use and going forwards. And I share David's concerns about this paper. I think it's pretty appalling, but I don't share his trust that we can leave it to after the executive decision to actually get a proper paper that explains how all these things are going to work. So I'd like to propose that this paper is withdrawn and fixed before the executive look at it, preferably brought back here as well beforehand.
And what is your timeline on that? Because the school places are required for September 2024.
Well, the timeline is as quickly as you can revise the paper. So you're going to have to revise it for executive anyway. So if you can do it, we can have a special meeting next week, surely.
I personally, I don't agree with that thing, but that's not my decision to make. It's a committee's decision on the broad terms. So actually, I'd like to have a vote on your counter proposal now as to whether that's acceptable. So those that accept that proposal, those against. That is rejected at the moment. Is it equal? 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry, I can't. I'm not looking. Hang on, let's do this one again. So your proposal is that this is rejected and passed back. That's an awful lot of work.
It's the whole point. So I think we've had a vote. Can we have the vote? We've had a vote and that's passed.
Sorry, can you hold, please? I'll have to take this in order actually, because David made the first proposal. So David's proposal has to come first. Is there a seconder to David's proposal? Thank you. Those in favour? 4. And those against? And no abstentions. So the vote we took, your proposal, is carried. And it makes it a little bit difficult for me to decide how we're going to go forward with anything else in here. Other than that, there is something that I wish to bring up and discuss and so that the vote on. There are actually 5 options listed in here, and I want us to make sure that we are all in agreement that 3 of those options are out of the equation, that we are just looking at two options. So options 3 is to pass it on to another service. Option 4, disposal for redevelopment, and option 5 was demolish and mothball. Are we in agreement? Is there a proposal that, well, I'm proposing this actually, that we ignore those 3 options and we are only concentrating on the 2 options that are put to us? Do I have a second?
Sorry, I thought we just voted to get the paper rewritten and brought back.
No, please. I'd like to get this sorted, because it's actually, there are 2 options in here that are concerning us, and there's only 2 options that have been discussed. The other 3 options have not been discussed at all. So unless we discuss them now, or we take them out of the equation, they also have to go back into this conversation. That's my view. If you disagree with it, then you can vote against it. I have no objections to that. My suggestion is that we understand, I think we all understand, there are 2 options in here that are in our main discussion. Either keep it as a leisure facility or transfer it to a school for school places. That's what we are talking about. We're taking that there are not enough information to warrant that. That's your point of view. But I would like to also turn around and say that there are 3 other options in here that we haven't discussed. Either they're included to be discussed and go forward, go into this, or they're taken out of the equation now. Is that understandable?
Which options are you?
So the options are, option 3 is to pass the
which page, please?
It's the main options. Yeah, I can't get to.
Chairman, if
3, 4 and 5. Please.
do you want me to?
Please.
Yeah. So obviously when executive had agreed the consultation, it set out the options as listed on page 10 through to 12, 13, and then concluding on page 14. I think, if I understand it, Chairman, is what we're trying to do at this stage is be clear that we're ruling out options 3, 4 and 5, 3 and 4, because that doesn't have 5, as viable, and therefore.
Can I maybe help, Chris? I've got no problem with removing options 3, 4 and 5. However, I would like the hybrid option considered, and that is not in here. I understand what you said about the hybrid option, but I'd like that clearly documented in the paper as well.
The hybrid option wasn't consulted on, so it's not part of the paper, so it can't be reconsulted.
What?
It was the hybrid option in the consultation. Not what we've discussed tonight, but we are asking for this consultation to be put back. So it's about what's in this consultation and in this paper in front of us. It's not about another thing.
Loads of things in this paper that weren't in the consultation.
This is a paper that going to executive.
This is the one
with
going
a proposal for action,
which
it refers to a consultation, but it ain't exclusively about the consultation.
So the paper in front of us has got 5 options that we were here to discuss about. We've only discussed 2 of them. So either we discuss the other 3 options as well as.
I think I've already agreed with you, Chris.
No.
I'm quite happy to take the other three out.
So this is what I'm saying. So I've got Norman's argument against it.
No, Norman was saying that the paper has got a lot of stuff in it which wasn't in the consultation. As you said yourself, the consultation is not the only thing that was discussed, and it is only part of the question. The consultation and what was in that or not is irrelevant to the rewording of this paper.
So I'll put this back to us again. Do we want to take those three options out? So I'm proposing that. Is there a second? And those in favour of taking those three options out? So it's options 1 and 2 that we're proposing goes back for re-evaluation.
Just to ask a technical question, because I think I don't understand. You're not the decision-making body. The executive's the decision-making body. So you're supposed to be recommending to the executive. So I think you can't say the paper. You're recommending to the executive that you want this redone. Which bit of it do you want? The consultation redone?
No, I've told you what I want redone, which we had a vote on a minute ago, and that's what I would like redone. This is what I'm recommending to the executive.
Can you just run through which things? Because if we're going to get them to the executive, we need to know what they are.
Well, it should be on the tape. I've just said it all once, but we'll get Neil to send it to you, Prue.
Fine. What I'm going to suggest in here is that yes, we recommend that this paper goes back for re-evaluation, and for other elements, as you've said, they will be in the minutes of the meeting, so they will be listed. That we propose, so don't need to presented to the executive so that they can take this in consideration, and we can talk to the officers and get this looked at. But the package that I'm looking at there is that these presented to us, or the report is brought back to us at the next planned meeting. Rather than the week, it's 2 weeks. It's the end of November.
That's fine by me. But before executive.
It's before executive, so that's why it comes back then. It's on the 12th. We've got a meeting on the 28th, I think, and executive's on the 30th. So do we have an agreement in house?
Well, I think we just had a vote on it.
I know we had a vote on that. It's about the timing. Does the timing affect other people within here as well? So I've got to give the executive, executors and the officers time to take this on board. And I think unless there's any objections, then we propose that this comes back to us on the 28th. Okay. Thank you. Those that no longer wish to be part and parcel of the proceedings are welcome to leave. Does that include me? you could just take your seats. Thank you. Before we go on to the next item, there was one other thing that I had on my list of things that we could consider to do, and that was the question about the strategic planning for the school, for the future of school places, etc. I think that particular item would be better placed with children's overview and scrutiny because they've got a better view of what's going on. So if you're in agreement, I'm going to make a suggestion that we request that children's overview and scrutiny take that on board and look at the strategic plan and report back to us with something in that area.
Chair, quite happy with your suggestion. The only reason I raised the point was it was relevant to the last issue, but happy with yours.
Thank you. Any objections to that? If it's a no, then that carries as well. Thank you. So agenda item 63. George, I think you're in the firing line for this one.
So you've got firing line. Is that what it is? Yeah. Thank you. Chairman, just a brief introduction from me. So members are aware of the ask, I guess, of this evening. Graham presented resources and assets and chief execs just a couple of weeks ago. You'll know that considerable work has gone into the emerging budget, both from managers and from the executive. You'll know as well that the council faces challenging time in terms of its budget, significant balance issues in terms of reaching a budget. You'll be aware there's a gap at the moment of around 5 million in terms of revenue and around 34 million in terms of capital, so a significant gap. And the proposals before you this evening seek to support and reduce that gap. Welcome your challenge and your views and suggestions and ideas that may help to come closer to bridging and resolving that gap. Chair, I'm not going to go through all the individual slides. I just wanted to point out you've got a number of documents here. On Appendix A, it sets the overall context, the key revenue savings, income, and also specials. And on that, I just wanted to highlight page 18, which is risks. And again, I won't go through all of the bullet points there in terms of risk, but I think it's worth just focusing on a number of them, which are in particular kind of facing us at the moment. And it's always difficult to choose a kind of priority list from the risk, but in terms of the ones that I would present you this evening, income is a big risk for us. Now, that's income from a planning application point of view, income from parking, income from other areas where there's a degree of uncertainty in terms of what that income brings. Members, I think, will know the risks around inflation and the considerable burden that's put onto the budgets this year. Now, appreciate things are moving in the right direction, but there is still a big risk around inflation and managing contract inflation, other inflation as we step into 24-25. Again, in this forum, I think you'll be aware about procurement challenges ahead of us. They are mainly from 2026. We've got a number of significant contracts due in 2026, and preparing for that is a significant issue for us. It has risks in terms of additional costs. We need to be prepared for that as we move into towards 2026. And then more immediate, temporary accommodation, a big risk around the additional costs related to temporary accommodation. You'll know cost of living issues are having a significant burden on to the community, and that is resulting in pressure on services, and those services cost money to support families, and that's very much showing in services such as temporary accommodation where costs are escalating. Risks there, Appendix C and D then give you further information. I think it's just worth point of clarification. Appendix D starts on page 85, and so the capital bids from 85 are the ones presented last year. So they're just a repeat of last year. The capital bids preceding page 85 are the bids before you this year. So if that helps to understand the package of information. We've got a number of officers here in the room and on the screen to ask questions, and of course the exec members are here as well, Chair. Thank you.
George. Not me. So what I'd like to ask is if executive members could briefly introduce their bids and make any highlights of any key issues. Let's see. Who would like to start that amongst the executives?
I think I'm supposed to start. Thank you very much, Chris and committee. I feel a bit like a batsman who's been waiting in the pavilion after a very, very long stand and wondering whether I can actually make it out to the middle, but I'm here. So first of all, I have a relatively small number of items. I would like to just emphasise the point that George made about the risks as well on page 18. And one of those identified risks is rising demand for housing, and in particular the cost of temporary and especially emergency accommodation. Emergency accommodation is essentially bed and breakfast accommodation when we've got no other accommodation available. And that's incredibly costly. And there is, as you, I'm sure, are well aware, enormous pressure now as a result of no-fault evictions by private landlords and problems related to domestic abuse that are seeing people rendered homeless. I'm going to start with the good news, so to speak, the savings and the identified saving associated with my area of responsibilities, PGR 17 on page 47. And this is essentially transferring some of the staffing costs that are currently held under the general fund into the HRA. So it's effectively reducing the liability on the general fund and transferring those costs into the HRA, which I think is where those particular costs properly should lie. There's one growth item which is a direct reflection, which is PGR 27 on page 56. And that's a direct reflection of what I just mentioned, the real challenge in relation to emergency accommodation in particular. And here we've got a gap, essentially, that's emerged between the amount of money we're able to claim as housing benefit and the total rental costs of bed and breakfast accommodation. And that gap has to be covered by the council. So that's responsible for that growth item. And then I have two items related to capital, PGC4, which is the refurbishment and extension of 48 Oxford Road. This is an asset that isn't held in the HRA. It's temporary accommodation for general use. And as I said, we desperately need temporary accommodation so we can relieve the pressure on emergency accommodation budgets. And this is really to both improve and expand the accommodation available at 48 Oxford Road, which is a property that we currently use for temporary accommodation. And then the other final capital item in my area is PGC5 on pages 74 to 5. And this is about refurbishment of shower blocks at Carter's Hill. Again, it's not an HRA asset, it falls in the general fund. And there's a legal requirement to undertake this work. We have absolutely no option because currently it's not compliant with legal requirements. I think those are the only things I need to draw to your attention, Chair. There are a couple of other items under my remit, but they're both covered off by money that isn't required in the general fund. They're funded either by grants or grant and Section 106, so that you probably don't need really to focus on those.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions from the floor, please?
Just one with two actually. With the Oxford Road refurbishment of the office into accommodation, what is going to happen to the person who is using that office? How do they do? I don't know what it was used for. How is that being accommodated? And sorry, the next question is really about, do we have some lessons learned from the gap that you've identified that needs to be filled and to make sure it doesn't happen again?
To the second point, immediately, yes, I'm sure there are some lessons to be learned. But I think there is a real problem with rising costs for emergency accommodation, and that, I'm afraid, does fall on the general fund, and it is a real problem. And the only way we can reduce the bed and breakfast bill is by having more temporary accommodation. So when people really get into difficulties and find themselves without a home at short notice, we can accommodate them in temporary accommodation, which we control ourselves, rather than much more costly private bed and breakfast rental. So, that's the best way in which we're going to be able to deal with this, getting more temporary accommodation available to us. Now, we are getting some coming on stream. The units at Grovelands are being released in phases. We've already got some occupied, and that will help, but we do need more. We are going to have to identify and acquire more opportunities for temporary accommodation if we're going to really control the burgeoning bed and breakfast bill. Question you asked, I'm not really in a good position to answer, but George might be.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's a really good question actually. So it's the nature of the use that requires an office or doesn't require an office. Temporary accommodation for normal purposes wouldn't necessarily require an office, so there'd be no use for it. If the site is being used for a particular purpose where the occupants need support, then you would need that kind of accommodation, because we're moving towards temporary accommodation. We don't need that office. So yeah, there's no impact on the users by taking that office away.
Yeah, I think it's because it's for general use rather than specialist use. If it was specialist use, it might require an on-site office to support that specialist use, but because it's for general use, it's assumed that it can be made available as accommodation.
Thank you, Stephen. It's irrelevant. So, Sarah, are you online?
I am. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. I've actually only got one line to demonstrate to you this evening, and that is the growth bid for making permanent 2 of the climate emergency officers in the team who are currently there through a special item. I think you can see from the report it's quite self-explanatory, and actually in addition to all the fantastic work that they do on our climate agenda, they're actually helping to bring in grant funding as well to help fund many of these projects. So short and sweet, open to any questions.
Sorry, there is one question quickly. Which page number are we on?
The actual report is, the actual particular sheet is on page 56 of the agenda.
Thank you.
It's PGR 26, if that helps.
Thanks, Sarah. I got that. So are there any questions from the floor? Your input, sir. I think we've taken that one on board. So if we pass on now, and Lindsay, if you could put your...
Right, I had all of 2 minutes in this long meeting. Thank you.
The capital board.
Thank you, Sarah. I too only have one entry, and that is on page 24. It's a special item revenue bid. Planning and enforcement staffing costs, 169,000 for 24/5 and 25/6 for 69,000. And as it says, it's to cover resource to involved with planning enforcement. We've had increased planning enforcement over the last year or so, and also work associated within the SDLs. And that we've had an ongoing, and we're trying to reduce that reliance on a special bid that we had from a few years ago. And on that, I do have one other comment, and it's a bit of good news. It all depends whether you put in a planning application, of course. Issued today as a letter where we've been talked about having an increase in the planning fees. It's been talked about for quite a while. That there will be a 35% increase in planning fees as and from the 6th of December. So there would be a growth in interest, assuming the planning applications still carry on through. But that has been done, and I believe there's a sort of rolling programme associated with updating it over a period. I don't remember the details. I think it was May 25 was mentioned as a possible other date. So that has been something that has been outstanding for a while, because the cost of quite a few of our planning applications, we don't necessarily recover everything.
Do you have any questions from the
open to questions?
Any questions? Sorry, Pauline, yes.
I just wondered if there was any balancing saving in interim staff or contractors or third parties.
I don't know.
Yeah, so as Lindsay was explaining, we're using a reserve to balance the staff costs and other costs related to the planning department. So clearly that reserve is running down. The good news that we've received today will help considerably with that. The team are holding vacancies at the moment, and it's likely that at least 4 of those vacancies will be taken out of the establishment to try and help with that picture as well. So yeah, it's a balancing act, looking at planning income fees, looking at our reserves, looking at the vacancies that we've had, managing the establishment, and then one hopes over the next year, 18 months or so, we can get into that more secure position as we go forward into the new local plan period as well, where we'll need the staff and the expertise to manage that process.
So is that a yes?
Yes, yeah. We're say managing the vacancies and reducing the establishment.
Thank you, George. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got quite a few, but I'm not. But I'm not going to go through them all. So I'll pick out a few for you. R5 on page 35. This is one which is shared between myself and Ian Shenton. It actually says the annual draw from reserves. Just for clarification, this is generally commuted sums deposited by developers for taking on our new assets, such as highways and parks. Okay. George mentioned risks on our income. I'll mention 2 particular ones. R7, page 37, which is moving traffic offences. We've currently got 11 live sites, but this allows us for the creation of additional sites and move the AMPR cameras from those sites that are becoming compliant to non-compliant sites, so making our network safer. R8 on page 38, and that links with R31 on page 61. Residential streets in high on-street parking demand areas. This requires a review, as residents are now working from home much more, and we need to explore the potential expansion of zones due to the demand, because it outstrips availability. The unrestricted spaces in those particular areas, we are proposing to restrict those to 1 to 2 hour parking to ensure turnover and not all day parking, which is really reserved for off-street car parks. Now, there's a lot of work still to be done on this. It's still in its infancy on this topic, We've still got to go out to consultation, and we're noting, draw your attention to the RAG status is currently on red. Okay, it links also with R31, which is a special item to cover off the shortfall in income for 24-25. There's a few capital ones as well, but I'll pick out two particular ones. C2, page 67, which is the local cycle walking infrastructure plans. This is grant funding or external funding, and it's funding that we haven't actually obtained yet. We hope to get those through bids, probably through Active Travel England as we develop the network. And C8, page 81, Wokingham Highways investment strategy. This is capital borrowing for the maintenance of the highway network. As has been said, it's really difficult times for finance, but we're still managing to retain this same level of budget. And just to remind the committee, on the 4th of September, officers did present to you a graph indicating where Wokingham Borough Council currently sits on its condition surveys and the average, and we're better than the South East region and England averages. And also central government have not really invested the appropriate amount of funding in the local road network across England and Wales. That comes out in the annual alarm survey, where there's currently a backlog of road maintenance, which has now reached over £14 billion. So this funding does actually assist with our maintenance. It prolongs the life of the asset, which is currently valued at £1.095 billion, and reduces the pressure on our revenue reactive maintenance budget. So that's where I was going to finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I see a lot of hands going up, so you shouldn't have said so much.
No, no surprise there.
Who went first? I'm going to start with ladies first, down the way along, if that's okay with yourselves. So, Pauline, if you want to go first, please.
My first question is actually on R8. I didn't quite understand. So what you're saying is there are going to be more residence parking zones, and that's going to generate £342,000 a year extra income. Is that right?
As I said, this is.
I know it's a guess at the moment.
It's in its infancy. We are looking at expanding potentially the residence parking zones, and in those particular areas where there's unrestricted parking at the moment, where people park all day, that would turn into 1 hour and 2 hour charging areas.
So that means residents who live in those streets will only be able to park for 1 or 2 hours?
No, residents can purchase their normal residence parking ticket, their permit, which will cover them. The problem we have is a huge demand, and the demand is outstripping the areas that we've actually got available. So we're looking at expanding potentially those zones, which will then allow further parking provision for residents, and the areas which are then left over, not to have those as all-day parking for anybody who comes along, but to then create 1 hour / 2 hour parking bays in those currently unrestricted areas.
So will those be metered?
That would be correct.
Which aren't at the moment, they're free.
They're not at the moment.
So that's where the money comes from.
Yeah, all of this would need to go through consultation. As I said before, this is currently a red RAG status. There's a lot of work still to be done. There's also a timetable in here at the bottom of page 38. So if everything went through and the consultations in June next year, with an end date of January 25, we would not be implementing this until 2025.
So just so I'm clear, the 342,000 income is mostly, presumably, from metered usage of currently free on-road parking. Is that right?
It's a combination of both, because if we're expanding the residential network as well, then there's additional income from there, plus the 1/2 hours, because those people are parking there all day. They really should be parking in off-street car parks.
So what's the split roughly? Because permits are only £15, aren't they, or something like that? They're not very expensive. Am I wrong?
I would need to ask Chris if he's got his calculator out on that one.
Roughly?
On the microphone for a while. I'd have to confirm the rates, but yes, this is all part of what we need to look at to have a look. So there are complete estimates in terms of the costs, and that takes an estimate in terms of the proportion of residential and the permit cost that might be, plus obviously the rate that it may be for the one.
So would my supposition that most of that will be on street paid parking be correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you. And the second question. I'm quite disappointed to see that what I think I understood from PGC8 was that the parking maintenance in WIS will continue to be not increased by inflation, but will be stagnant at the current rate. Is that right?
I would love.
Sorry. That's what the page number is. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh,
page 81.
81. Yeah. I would love to increase that further. I would love to put another £500,000 into it, another million. But where am I going to take it from? That's the balance that we have. So if we increase that one, we're going to have to take something else away from capital borrowing. And that's the dilemma we're currently in.
Okay, thank you. We'll see whether we can find some ideas for you.
Okay, thank you. So I was going along this way. Did you have anything, Charles? No. Laura, thank you.
Thank you. Also back on resident parking zones, PG R8. Some recent feedback I've had from Woking businesses is a lot of their staff are parking in the on-street car parks because they can't afford the parking charges, including volunteers as well. So it's just when doing the consultation, just obviously make sure that businesses are properly consulted, because you don't want increase in revenue here to cause bad things going down the line with loss of staff and shop closures and all sorts of things like that. So it's just a big red flag on that one. And then the second one was over the page, the school keep clear markings, PG R13. I wasn't quite sure what this is really discussing. Is this meaning that school keep clear markings aren't enforced at the moment?
There are two schools where we're currently doing trials, the Holt and Loddon Primary. And this is an expansion of AMPR cameras on school keep clears to other schools. Now, what that means is the resource, i.e. the civil parking enforcement officers, don't need to be stood there at those particular locations. It's picked up on the cameras, and then the cameras then do that type of work, and therefore the penalty charge notices can go out through that system. The civil parking enforcement officers can be deployed elsewhere.
That sounds great. Is that going to happen to all the schools if the pilot's a success?
We've got to take this step by step, but we're doing currently two schools. They seem to be working quite well, hence why we want to expand this a bit further.
Thank you. David.
Thanks, Chair. My question was also about R13. I don't quite share my dear friend's enthusiasm for stopping people on the school run. It's one of the most stressful parts of the day, and actually anything that involves penalising people dropping off kids at school to me is fraught with emotional challenges. But that notwithstanding, you say under the implications if this isn't successful, the council would not be able to deal effectively with the issues raised by parents, blah, 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 blah. But presumably if it is successful, you don't get your 50k.
It's very similar to moving traffic offences. When the areas become compliant, that's great news, because it's safety for the children that are actually attending those schools. That's what we want to get to at the end of the day. Safety on the network, okay? So we can move cameras around as well. So if an area then starts to become non-compliant, we can move them back. But this is an expansion of the existing network that we've currently got. But the ultimate aim is to have compliance everywhere. Compliance even with moving traffic offences, because our network then becomes much safer.
Can I just come back on that? I totally agree with the question of compliance, but that isn't the agenda item. The agenda item is financial savings. So at some point, when you get the demand of total compliance, we won't be making that savings in the budget. Is my point, but
As Laura mentioned, there are other schools as well, and there's a lot of schools within the borough. We can expand this network out, so they're going to other locations which are not compliant. So it's a step-by-step approach.
So if I may just clarification myself, so that means if you've got an area that is becoming compliant, you can move the camera to an area that isn't being compliant. So effectively there is this opportunity, although it's not supposed to be opportunist, to keep maintaining those funding by moving the cameras.
That would be correct. If we've got a network of locations built up, and this is a step-by-step approach. We're currently doing the trials, and then this is moving that to an expansion of that network. And for the future, we might be able to do even further sites.
Thank you, Paul. Peter.
Yeah. So PGR3 about VAT clawback from Bedington and the other.
That would be Mr. Shenton.
Oh, is it Ian? So Ian hasn't got to that one, so I'll save that one for you. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Thanks. Alistair.
The school cameras. When you move them to a new site, do you put a dummy one on the poles so that people don't know they've been moved?
We've discussed this, but we haven't got that far at the moment.
And could I just go back to the on-street parking that people working in shops? I mean, I think you can be reimbursed by your employer for parking with tax-free, can't you? Just tax. So it's really a business decision by the businesses. It's not. It's whether they do that or not. It's not. They could just as easily reimburse their employees.
They possibly could, but as I say, there's a lot of work still to be done on this, and we've still got to go out for consultation, and we'll listen to the feedback we get from the consultation. We have had residents saying they just cannot find a space in their own road locally where they currently live, and they're fed up with some of the all-day parking. So we've also got to take that balance as well.
Any other questions from the floor? So I do have one comment from myself. When we're talking about changing some of these currently unregulated street parking to residence parking permits and for paid parking, is there any opportunity to consider essential workers, care workers, etc., that might have to be visiting residents in those areas that have to park in those streets? About a community parking permit.
This is all early days at the moment, and officers will be looking at all aspects of the residence parking zones and what will become planned to be restricted areas.
Thanks, Paul. My apologies. Question.
Just to add to the debate on the schools parking, it shouldn't be looked in isolation as well. So you bring in other elements like the active travel plan, walking, cycling networks, local transport plan, those other elements that the council's dealing with, and and Chris is dealing through highways and transport, will also come into play and will also have an impact on that issue as well, in a positive way as well.
I turned it off. Thank you.
Sorry, Chris. Sorry, Chair. I did have a question. This is about PGR11, which is about the charge for contractors for roads types 3 and 4. I just wonder if that's a statutory thing. We're allowed to do that. I don't understand. And does that apply to all general utilities such as water and so forth?
Yes, is the answer. I was quite surprised that we weren't charging on level 3 and level 4 roads. The authorities that I've worked for before were charging. So officers have now put that forward in this bid as a saving, and it's for all utilities who are working on the highway network.
And just follow on for that, is that something that can be done immediately, or does it have to go through some sort of process?
There is a process to go through. We have to consult with the utilities, but our neighbouring authorities already charge anyway. Bracknell Forest does, Hampshire does. So, you know, it's a situation where we should have been charging in the first place.
Okay, sorry, Anna. Sorry, Chris. Going on with this, drags out of my memory, damage to highways assets, such as someone drives their car into a lamppost. Are we now going to be charging for the fixing of that from their insurance or whatever?
Yeah, yes is the answer, provided we can get the details of who crashed into the asset.
Sorry, Alistair.
Sorry, I was just going to ask the same question as Peter about the crashing.
Yeah, I've got lots of photographs. I'll bring them in. Pauline.
Just having a look at the sort of shape of this, I wondered, guys, would there be any saving in amalgamating Ian Shenton's car parking charges, car park management, car park everything with your car park management, car park charges, car park everything, and just having one set of policies and one set of officers looking at them? Would that save any money?
It already is. It all comes under Jeff Hislop.
Yeah.
Ian's talking about and what you're talking about is an artificial one. It's all under your management. Okay. Might be easier if you just put it all under your heading.
It's the split between what's highway and leisure.
Not sure the residents get that, but yeah, okay.
Any more questions for? No? Thank you. Ian.
I must confess, Pauline, that it was a surprise to me when I first saw car parking attributed to my name. But yes, it's the same system at Dinton Pastures as Paul's car parks use. I would just, in the interest of brevity, highlight this is formalising the expected savings from the change in the waste collection service and the change from the street fencing and grounds maintenance contracts the process that we've just been through and has been recently concluded. Those are in the savings area. I'll briefly mention a couple of growth bids. Some councillors who get badgered by residents may be pleased to note that we are putting in a small growth bid to tackle some of the overhanging vegetation, the encroaching vegetation on footpaths. It won't solve the whole problem, but it's a start. And hopefully we'll be able to put more in future years, but you never know. Environment and safety doesn't have a dedicated contract manager. We would unlike highways, for example, and we would like to rectify that. I don't know if I need to say any more. The capital bids are fairly self-explanatory unless anyone has questions on those.
And now you can ask your questions.
I was RG3, the VAT on the car parks. I was quite interested to see that bit. I didn't realise, we paid VAT on car parks, which is a big thing. Would you be able to do retrospective claim back from HMRC?
I noticed that Graham's gone, but I don't know. This has all been negotiated with HMRC to this point, so I'm in the hands of our finance colleagues, and maybe George knows a little more.
Well, because it's a live question that we've asked HMRC, and of course, if we can, we certainly will do. I think the window, if there is one, is very short, maybe 3 or 4 years. But certainly, if that's an opportunity, we'll pursue that. Yeah.
One, yes, please.
Just curious now, does that mean we've been charging VAT on it when we shouldn't have been?
I believe so. Yes, I believe that they've only recently advised us of that. They've been taking VAT off us that they shouldn't have been taking.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's one good question. Does that open us to a liability from a claim from people who've been paying it in good faith?
Who would like to put their feet in that particular pond?
So there is an ongoing discussion with HMRC about retrospective. The distinction to be made is it's because it's classed as a country park, and that's different under the sort of the tax guidance and the tax legislation. So it is country park status that differentiates it from other car parks. But there is a retrospective discussion going on to see if that can be actively gained.
No, what I was thinking was if you've got, say, a dog walker that has been parking in your country park car park and paying VAT for the last 3 years on the rate of their car parking charge, are we going to have to pay them back?
That's an awful lot of parking tickets you've got to collect. That's the problem.
Curious, that's all.
Chair, we'll have a look at it. I'm not sure what the answer is, but we'll ask some legal advice on it.
Laura.
Thank you. On the VAT exemption on country park charges, does that cover the aviation museum as well? Because people park there to use the country park.
I don't believe so. I think that's a separate issue. It is the aviation museum car park. People do use it for access to Dinton pastures, but that's not its prime purpose, and that's not what it's judged as. I don't believe so.
Had to ask. And then second of all, countryside implement peak car parking charges, PG R4. Is there a reason that we're doing this above and beyond because others are doing it? Because that isn't really a good enough reason for me, because it will penalise families and working people at a time of cost of living. Just doesn't seem quite right, and it doesn't even make that much more money. I don't know if there's something more behind it of car parks get full, so actually charging peak makes sense, but I just want to get some more information from yourself.
You'll appreciate there's a time lag between these templates being prepared and this meeting. We've had just those discussions of late, and we are coming to the conclusion that it's probably not advisable. But so when you see the final documentation, you may well see that item not there.
I hope it is gone. Brilliant. Thank you.
But it's yes. Steve wants to
just to be really clear and clarify on that matter. The increased income that's in the proposal still needs to be gained, and that still needs to be fed into the overall budget process. The issue is about operational implementation. Would it be able to be implemented in an operational way that is clear to all the users, or is there another way of doing that with the car parking charges? So the proposal has laid out the income that it wishes to generate would still need to come in, because that is sort of factored into the budgets. It's just looking at the best way of implementing that in an operational way, so as not to make it confusing. So we'll just sort of tweak and nuance that, and then implement that when we've worked that one through.
So it sounds as if it is happening, but that seems to be different from what you were saying, Ian.
many microphones. The income will still be needed and will still be raised, but it won't be from peak time charging. From our current discussions, we are pretty much of a mind that we will find a different way of raising the income.
David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just very glad about that answer, because I was going to question the peak charges as well. Living where I do on the back of California Country Park, residential roads are really bogged down with people trying to duck the parking charges in the country park. So no further incentive for them to do so would be good news. So I'm glad that that's probably gone. I was interested in one of the small ones there, the car parking charges at the Aviation Museum. Is that, and my concern would be how that actually impacts the museum itself. 40,000 quid for something that's only open 2 days a week and only 4 hours at a time there seems to assume an awful lot of visitors. But it's not a cheap day out. So I'm just wondering how that works with the future of the Aviation Museum.
Yes, there's volunteers there. There's people who are going to the museum. But there's a significant number of people who use it as a backdoor entry to Dinton Pastures without paying Dinton Pastures car parking prices. And that's more who it's aimed at. It's not aimed at the people at the museum, and we've built in ways for them to avoid paying any charges.
Charles. Thank you. Two quick things from me. First of all, PGR20, which was £68,000 of income expectation. That's not happening. Now, I understand what it says here, basically, that they were schemes that, were recommended and couldn't be delivered, but it doesn't say what these schemes were.
I've got, yeah. Yes, it was probably an over-optimistic estimation of how quickly we could start to commercialise some of our assets and generate income from them. And now it's a realisation that's a longer process than people had imagined initially. And that's just building it back in. There will be some commercialisation in due course, but it's taking longer than anticipated.
Are there actual ideas which are being discussed or proposed that you can share with us? Because this is not an insignificant amount of money here.
No, I believe that a number of issues are being followed. George?
It's probably, yeah. So I think Ian's absolutely right in terms of the difficulty of finding the additional commercial income. The council reached out recently to procure additional services, specialist services that might help us on that journey, essentially, in terms of advice around our commercialisation of our assets and what we could offer. So that's still work in progress at the moment, but we want to review those ideas and take obviously appropriate ones forward. So it's still work in progress, Charles, but we're keen to do what we can on that commercial picture.
Thank you. The second question was just picking up the discussion that's just taken place about VAT on car parking in the country parks. I understand the answer and I understand what officers said as well, but does the same apply to highways parking?
Highways parking, off-street parking for highways has to have VAT on it of 20%.
Thank you. All clear.
Sorry, please, Steve. Just to reiterate that with regards to the VAT on the country park, the distinction is it's a country park under the tax code and therefore is slightly different. So that's our sort of understanding of the discussions with HMRC on that. Okay.
Pauline. Sorry, Pauline. Norman was before you, if you don't mind.
That's Karen's question.
Thank you. Just one on the waste collection service changes. Then there's obviously a special item because the implementation has been pushed back to.
Sorry, could you just tell me what the page number is?
It's PGR 28, which is on page 58. So the question really is, why is the waste collection changes been pushed back to August, and are we confident in that date now?
I don't think it was ever scheduled to go from the 1st of April. So effectively what this is doing is putting the annualizing it, but then putting in a special item to allow for the date. I don't think the exact date was particularly well known. There's a lot of processes to go through before we get to that point. But now we're beginning to finalise on a date. It's possible to actually adjust the annual saving by a special item.
So, I mean, I think initially the date was proposed to be summer, and then it was July, and now it's August. Is it early August, late August? Do we actually have a date now?
Do we have a latest date, George?
So just to pick up on that, and you'll also notice in the pack that there is an additional saving in there identified for the £1 million for the waste collection changes. So we've had a look at the project. We're implementing it, as members will know. We've just finished this week the briefings to all of the political parties last week, and we're at scrutiny tomorrow night. So we're still confident that those savings can be made, which is the narrative that we gave out at all of the briefings. We've had those figures externally checked and validated to make sure that we've got confidence in that full saving being arrived at. Yes, as we laid out within those political briefings as well, there is a lot of moving parts within that project, and it will take some alignment, and it will take, residents and wider communities in behavioural change. So there is a slight delay. We've had a look at that project. We've sort of looked at the governance and improved that. We've launched that, and we're ready to go, and all of that will be consistent with the roadmap that we laid out in the briefings that we presented last week, and we'll do so tomorrow night at scrutiny as well. That we'll be going live in the sort of the summer of next year, so we will start to put in that saving to the value as required.
My understanding was it was initially July, and now we're most recently told August. I was just wondering if there's a date in August. If there isn't, that's fine, but if there was a date, then that would be good.
So, Chair, so just pick up on what Steve said. There is no fixed date in August. August is our implementation month. As we've got a lot of work to do, as Steve explained, but there's no actual date we can say to you now. But we're very confident about the programme and be very pleased to give more information tomorrow evening on that programme as well.
If I can just add another question to that. So when we look at the fact that the woolly bins actually might be delivered during the period from April onwards or whenever they're procured, they're going to be in place, and it's once everything's in place that you're then in a position to turn and say, now we change over to that facility. So have you got firm plans for how many blue bags are going to be issued in a temporary? Have you got enough stock to cope for a delay?
So for the new wheel bins, we've already gone through the procurement exercise for that, and that is all finalised. As regards any of the sacks, we've checked all of that, and we're confident in that. We're finishing off some of the double checks around some of our more vulnerable residents, so assisted collections and clinical, and moving through all of that. So we have confidence in them, in the plan. And as soon as that starts to be implemented, the bins delivered, then as soon as we start to sort of pull away from the additional rounds, our costs will fall away because of there won't be a need then for as many waste vehicles and collections to be financed.
Thanks, Steve. Pauline.
Thank you. It might be the time of night, so apologies if I've got this horribly wrong. But I'm getting confused about PGC6. So PGC6 on page 26 talks about Rook's Nest. There's a PGC6 on page 76, which also spookily talks about Rook's Nest. But there's also one on page 93, which talks about highways maintenance. And the question I've actually got is on the one on page 93, which I apologise for because we've already finished highways. But if I could, so maybe you could explain why there's two with the same number, and then I can ask you the question.
Okay. So from page 50, I think it's 55. Let me double check. Bear with me. 65. 65. So 65 to 84 were up last year's bids that had just been recopied for the agenda. So that's what was presented last year. And then what you've got previous to that is the current position, if that helps.
We've got two with the same number on the sheet.
Yeah.
Maybe we should change the process a bit so we don't. It's certainly confusing. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, it could be.
Could I ask about 93? It just suddenly, just looking at it, because I was looking for Rook's Nest and found this instead. It says there's project costs of 9.1 million, and it says we haven't got any money, and that's for road maintenance. It's a bit worrying. Is that right? Page 93, Chris.
Yeah, again, so Chair, this is last year's paper, not this year's paper.
Sorry, so it's 2023 to 2026, but it doesn't refer to this year.
Because this was, yeah, so it was presented last year for 23-24, the current year that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And the bids this year are being presented for 24-25, which is the year we're going into. So
I'm worrying about nothing, and you've got money for road maintenance.
Yes.
Fine, thank you.
Turn that on, my apologies. To recognise the imperative for financial management and to consider the report, challenge proposals and identify further ideas to address the financial shortfall. So apart from giving everybody parking tickets, I think we've actually covered this quite well. Are there any observations that you wish to make before we go and go to a vote for this, to take note of this? So my proposal is that we note this as per the recommendation. Those in favour? Against? Thank you. So as part of the process that goes forward, that this and the other items will be taken to executive by myself to go and present our things. So the minutes of the meeting of the previous topic and this one will be taken in front of the executive verbatim. There's no adjustment to it. We give them everything we've talked about. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, officers. You wish you'd been first instead of last, but I do apologise. But we haven't done too bad. 10 o'clock's not too bad. Thank you all.